Good evening, everyone. I'm Suzanne Stanis. I'm the Vice President of Education for Indiana Landmarks, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Indiana Landmark Center this evening. Legg's presentation serves as a kickoff for our holiday church tour this Saturday from 10 until 2. And if you haven't seen St. Rita's in person, I highly encourage you to do it. You will not be disappointed. It is a most impressive place. You'll also have the opportunity on the tour to visit Central Christian, Roberts Park, see this building in its entirety, and a behind-the-scenes peek at Goulding and Wood pipe organ builders. They're responsible for constructing and repairing pipe organs across the United States, including our Sanborn pipe organ, as well as the one at St. John's downtown on Georgia Street. Tickets for the tour are $20 or $15 for Indiana Landmarks members in advance. Price goes up $5 the day of the tour. And if you're looking for any Christmas gifts, don't forget we've got our Rescued and Restored book for sale at the check-in desk, as well as gift memberships to Indiana Landmarks. It's a great way to help somebody understand the importance of preserving meaningful places. Welcome to all of our Zoom attendees. We're using the webinar version of Zoom tonight. So if you have questions, please type those in the Q&A. And this event is being recorded, and so everyone who is registered will receive a link to the recording. And the wonderful thing about Zoom is it's great to see how many out-of-state attendees we have. We have people representing Georgia, Tennessee, Texas, Arkansas, and Virginia. So welcome to all of you. So now I'd like to turn the stage over to Eunice Trotter, the Director of Indiana Landmarks Black Heritage Preservation Program. Eunice has been crossing the state to introduce herself and develop programs to promote and preserve Black heritage, like the inspiring story that you'll hear tonight of St. Rita's. So welcome, Eunice.
Good evening. I have the pleasure of introducing Legg. But before I do that, I just want to tell you a little bit about the Indiana Landmarks Black Heritage Preservation Program. The BHPP, as I call it, was founded this year, just 90 days ago. And so in 90 days, I have, as Suzanne said, traveled the state, organizing citizens in an effort to get them to support our effort to preserve Black heritage. There is so much statewide that we know about and that has not been documented that we are losing because of time and the damage that time does to a unprotected facility. So, we are really, on a mission to preserve Black heritage, such as that which St. Rita has for us here, not just in Indianapolis, but just nationally. If you haven't been to that church, and you'll learn more about it, it is the most beautiful church with so much history and heritage. So on to the introduction. So that's my plug for the program. Legg is the chairman of the St. Rita Catholic Church Capital Campaign. He attended St. Rita Grade School as a youth, and upon graduation attended Breba Preparatory High School. He completed undergraduate studies at Purdue and IUPUI and currently holds a master's degree in education from the National School of Education in Evanston, Illinois. As an early supporter of historic preservation, Caleb was a former president and resident of the Old North Side Historic District. He presided over the dedication of Great Oak Commons Park, the Day Spring Center, and the renovation of Shawn Grove Park, as well as leading many historic tours of residences in the Old North Side. As an early supporter of Indiana Landmarks, Cal did significant stabilization work on the Colvin House and the Koch House, which are now wonderfully preserved by their present owners. Mr. Legg is the co-author of the Indiana Black History Journal, Volume 1, which he hopes to release for publication next year. He is currently restoring the circa 1874 Hub Shoe Store building in downtown Shelbyville, Indiana, and continues to be very active in the preservation community. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Legg.
Thank you, Mr. Trotter, for that wonderful introduction. And thanks to all of you for coming out to hear about this unique and unusual church. Want to acknowledge my pastor, Father John Bosco, and my former church administrator, Sister Gail Trippett. So thank you so much for allowing us to have St. Rita be so prominently featured. So to get started, I want to say that I want this to be a very conversational type of presentation. Many times we, being observers, we get involved in some very staid, boring presentations. And I hope not to have that happen tonight. St. Rita, the church that you see featured here, was founded in 1919. And it was founded under some very troubling conditions here in central Indiana, and I'll go into some of those things. The building that you see was built in 1958, but our church goes back to 1919. And I will share a little bit of how that came to be. The church, as you see, is clad with a Notre Dame style buff brick, and it is very unusual. The tower that you see is 6 stories tall. It has a unique cantilever structure that is anchored into the front of the church. So when we had trouble with the bell tower, the thoughts were, well, what happens if we take it down? Well, you can't take it down because it's cantilevered in the front of the church. And we have priceless art on the back of that, which we will be seeing a little bit later. So I'm going to dive right into the presentation. There'll be time for questions and answers as we go. And first, I want to talk a little bit about the history and how St. Rita came to be. Indianapolis has a very troubled past, as many states do. Thank God we've overcome that. But you can't really talk about St. Rita without knowing the conditions that were in place when St. Rita was founded. Between 1915 and 1925, unfortunately, Indiana was at the height of the segregation movement. The person that you see depicted here is D.C. Stevenson, and he was the leader of the Indiana Ku Klux Klan. And under his leadership, the Klan became extremely powerful, so much so that the Indiana Klan was more influential and had more members than the National Klan. It presented a lot of uncertainty for Black Catholics because the Klan obviously did not like Jews, they did not like Blacks, and they did not like Catholics. So we were Black and Catholic at the same time. So we had the target on our backs, basically. At that particular time, an astounding 30% of Indiana white males were card-carrying Klansmen. A half of the Indiana General Assembly were Klans members, as well as our mayor and our governor. And as a result of that, they were controlling the social and political scene in Indianapolis to a great degree. Shortridge was an integrated school under Abram Shortridge, but due to the influence of the Klan, all of the Black students were expelled from Shortridge and had to go elsewhere. There was a young lady who was a senior at the time, and their family sued the Indianapolis School Board, but because they were so heavily leveraged with the Klan, they lost the lawsuit. All they wanted to do was for her to graduate from Shortridge, but they did not allow her to do that. And it's eventually led to the establishment of course, our renowned Crispus Attucks High School, which I'm sure a lot of you know about because of the whole segregation movement at the time. So that under that climate is the impetus for St. Rita. Some other facts that people from Indy don't know is that this lovely building, the Century building that's in the warehouse district, it was the location of the old Fiery Cross newspaper, which was the Klan newspaper. So, and right around the corner from that on Virginia Avenue was the headquarters for the National Klan, for Indiana Klan rather. So these times were very uncertain times for Black Catholics. In Richmond, Indiana, just to give you a little bit more historical context, the Star Piano Factory building, which is you see on the left, and they had a recording studio, but because they catered to individuals as well as labels, the Klans co-opted Star and used them to produce their records that they sold, especially the old Fiery Cross records, but those were in Richmond, Indiana, just right down the road. So I'm leading up to why do we need a St. Rita? Because we were not really wanted by most. Churches back in those days had a ethnocentric connotation. We had churches downtown that were Irish and that were Italian and that were Polish. There was really no place for us, and it took a priest by the name of Charles Curran who had a vision. He envisioned the Madonna visiting him as a Black Madonna. This was a white priest. And he said, the Madonna says, you need to do something for your Black brothers. And so he took that mission, and I'll shorten that part of it because it ended up having the St. Anne's School behind the old St. Bridget's Parish, which was at St. Clair and back then West Street, which is now Martin Luther King Drive. That's where the Black students had to go for safety and protection. The nuns protected them. But they were under constant threat for the Klan because the Klan said, if you integrate it, we're going to cause a lot of problems for you. And so the archdiocese acted on that. Bishop Chartrand, which they used to have a high school on the south side of Indianapolis named Chartrand, he allowed St. Rita Parish to be established in 1919. And this building that you see was the original St. Rita church, school, and also the residency for the priest in this tiny little building. And it was originally a chapel from the Knights of Columbus at Fort Benjamin Harrison, and it was relocated to 19th and Arsenal, and that is the original St. Rita Church right there. The building still stands, but it is in very sad condition, and because of health concerns, it'll have to be demolished. But that is our original church, school, and rectory, where everything started and where the Black Catholics were welcome, and they immediately embraced that building, and everything that we have today stems out from this little building. So in 1919, we had a pastor by the name of Father Joseph and Bryan. And then in 1935, Father McShane came on board. And then in 1935, our priest who did most of the construction work for St. Rita, Father Bernard L. Strange, came on board. He was almost a miss for St. Rita because he got out of St. Minoret Monastery in 1934, and he was assigned to St. Joan of Arc at 42nd and Central. But in 1935, they brought him over to St. Rita. He immediately assumed the role as the administrator, and he assumed the full pastorship of St. Rita in 1947. The article that you see off to the right is a copy of the Indianapolis News from 1919 that talks about the $18,000 that's going to be invested in that building, and that it would accommodate about 250 communicants, and 4 classrooms will provide educational facilities for about 200 children, which how they got 200 children in those little small rooms, I don't know. It's very tiny. And here is a picture of one of the early trustee boards. Father Strange is the gentleman in the middle on the first row, and Father McShane is on the right. Church parishioners at the top, and many of those church parishioners are still members of St. Rita today. Their families are still members of St. Rita today. And this was in 1935. This priest was born in Bramble, Indiana, which is right down the road from Legg. And when he came to St. Rita, he said, I only saw 2 Black people before I ever came to St. Rita. And they put him in charge of an all-Black parish. But to his credit, he embraced the spirit, and he worked tirelessly for close to 40 years to build what we have today, along with the parishioners, because he was very interactive. He didn't believe in giving you anything. You had to earn what you got. And so when he first started the campaign to build the church, he was told that, hey, you can't build a church. It costs a lot of money to build a church. So he says, okay. He came back about a year later, and he went down to inform the bishop that he was getting ready to start construction. And he says, well, hold on a minute. He said, you know, it's expensive to build a church. And he says, well, I'm just here to inform you about the construction. We've already got the money. So that's the kind of guy he was. I served Mass for him for 6 years. So I had many firsthand conversations with him about his mission, about his beliefs, about the artifacts that are in St. Rita, and I'll be sharing some of those with you. As a picture of Father later in life, and also an ad from the Indianapolis Recorder in 1936. It talks about the big bingo lotto party that's going to be going down on the school grounds, and that the 11th prize, 2 tons of Virginia coal, because back then everybody had a coal burner or oil, and so he knew that would be a lucrative draw. And he sponsored bingos, house raffles, where they would buy an old house, fix it up, and raffle it off. Mardi Gras Day, skating parties, dances, which are legendary if you're Black and Catholic in Indianapolis, and even not Catholic, because they invited everyone to these youth events. There were up to 600 kids that would come to our youth dances, and that kept them out of trouble, kept them off the streets. And little known fact that St. Rita also hosted fashion shows where they would have persons, designers that would donate designer clothing, and our ladies would model those clothes in the gymnasium, and they say, well, this parish fashion is modeled by Rita Gwynn. And so we were out there. Everybody knew about St. Rita. And as I tell people who don't know so much about our history, when it comes to Black history, you have the 10th Street YMCA, you have the Madam C.J. Walker Center, you have the Recorder newspaper, and you have St. Rita. That's where we are in the history of Black Catholics in Indianapolis. This is a Sanborn map, which is a fire insurance map. It shows St. Rita, although they have it designated here as a public school, lots 1 through 5 belong to St. Rita, and Father eventually got all of these lots, which is now our current campus. It's interesting to note that there was a movie theater on the corner of 19th and Martindale, which is now on Dr. Andrew J. Brown Drive, And that movie theater existed when we bought the little chapel over from Fort Harrison. So just an interesting juxtaposition of how things changed from 1927 to the current day. This is our current campus today. And it's a little bit distorted here, but I will just tell you that if you go, the brown building, I think I have a pointer here too. Maybe. But the building that's labeled number 8, that's the original kindergarten building, that the original St. Rita building, unfortunately the one that we're going to lose. But in our current campus, we have the church and sanctuary, we have a bell tower, we have a new church office built in 72, a priest residency 72, the old gymnasium, which is now the Father Bernard L. Strange Family Life Center, was built in 1954. The library in 1966 at the insistence of Elaine Wisdom, who was key in getting that library built. We had an underground pedestrian walkway. Father did not like his floors to be dirty. So when it rained outside, you got all these little feet coming into the church. He's not having that. So all of our buildings are connected by underground pedestrian walkway, which was very forward thinking in the 1960s. We have of course, the original day nursery kindergarten building, which is the original St. Rita. And to the north, which is now the home of the Family Promise Center, we have our original rectory and office that's built in 54. And then we built an addition onto the preschool building and a courtyard in the early 1960s. So this is what Father Strange grew out of that little tiny little building of 4 rooms to what we currently have today. Quite remarkable. And St. Rita has some notable firsts that people that are not associated with the parish may not know. Our gymnasium floor is multifunctional. It's in a circular pattern because Father, being progressive, gymnasiums are not just for boys. We need to have something for the girls to do also. So the circular pattern of that gym floor, and I think there's only one other one in Indiana, was so that the girls could roller skate. And the circular pattern kept the floors from getting marred. So pretty forward thinking, don't you think, for back in those days. We were the first parochial school with a dedicated library. And I mentioned the fashion shows earlier and the underground walkway. We have many notable graduates and faculty members. I won't name them because I know somebody will get mad at me, but I will say that we have Indiana's first Black veterinarian, which is a graduate of St. Rita grade school. And so again, the only Catholic church in the Archdiocese that was constructed specifically for African Americans. All of our buildings were constructed without debt, paid for by the parishioners. Nickels, dimes, and pennies. And our priest arranged the first interracial high school football game, which was between Cathedral and Crispus Attucks. Before then, they were not playing each other. We had one of the earliest grade school gymnasiums with a fully automated scoreboard. We established a tuition payment plan for financially challenged families, which was later adopted by many other churches in the Archdiocese. The earliest day nursery for working moms in 1964, we're taking care of 3- and 4-year-olders so that their moms could go to work. So we're talking progressive things here. And also the kindergarten in 58. And that another fact is that our Golden Gloves boxing school and PAL club was the first of its kind to have that, to keep young men occupied, keep them off the streets, give them something to do, which was Father Strange's mission most of the time. These gentlemen here came out of the St. Rita Boxing Club. Marvin Johnson He's a 3-time light heavyweight title holder. And Colin Chaney, also a heavyweight boxer, won 92, had 92 bouts, 59 wins, 26 losses, and 6 draws. He ended up being Marvin Johnson's coach and coached him for the remainder of his career. And Colin became a police officer after he stopped boxing. And so he was continually involved with the PAL Club. And St. Rita participated in the Golden Gloves competition, as well as many of the PAL Club events downtown at the Armory. And a notable thing that in 1956, Father Strange and Chaney were welcomed to the State House to receive an award from the governor at the time, George Craig, and they became honorary members of the athletic commission because of their commitment to boxing and pugilism and keeping kids off the street. So we get back to our main centerpiece. So I start talking about some of the architecture, some of the things that you want to know about this fabulous building. To the left is our bell tower, our church. We have a chapel in the middle, St. Joseph's Chapel. We have our new church office, and to the right, we have the priest residency. These are all the things that grew out of that little tiny building. And these are the church building you will see on the tour on Saturday if you decide to join us. And I hope that you will. I mentioned earlier that it's a 6-story tower, limestone clad on 2 sides, and the Notre Dame style brick on the other 2 sides. And I mentioned the cantilever construction. The bells in the tower were put in there and designed by Verdon Bells and Clockworks. They have been in business since the 1840s. They're the oldest bell company in the country. They are the ones who did our bells and recently came out to inspect them and said, these bells are in perfect condition. We just need to redo the gear works. So that's part of our capital campaign, is to restore this bell tower and get those bells pealing again. This plaque is on the northwest corner of our building, and it is a brick. And it's from the original White House. When they did a remodeling of the White House, they uncovered these bricks that were thought to be put in the White House by the assistance of the enslaved labor. And so when that happened, Indiana Congressman Andy Jacobs, who was just at that point an Indiana congressman, he went later on to serve in the US Congress for 30 years. They got together with the Eisenhower administration and donated this brick to St. Rita because of our involvement in African-American history, and Prodeo et Patria, for God and country. And so during World War II, St. Rita pledged over $50,000 in bonds to support the overturning of the Nazis. And so that was quite remarkable for a small parish, and shows our commitment to country and to God. And we still do that today. So if you get a chance, take a look at that historic plaque on the other side. It was blessed in a mass, special mass by Father. This medallion that you see is the Rose of St. Rita, our patron saint. St. Rita, for those of you who don't know about St. Rita, she was an abused woman, and when her husband passed on, she joined the ministry and became a nun. And upon doing so, she was inflicted with a wound in her middle of her forehead. And, and it was thought to be in sympathy with Christ and his crowning of thorns. So this medallion is in the middle of our church when you ascend to the altar steps, and there's also one in the entrance to the church. The design was executed by Dominique Santa Rosa. Santa Rosa Tile and Marble are still in business today. As a matter of fact, John Santa Rosa went to Brebeuf with me, and he now runs the company after his dad and grandfather passed away. And so I'll be talking more about Santa Rosa as we go. But that is in homage to our patron saint. And Saint Rita is the saint of the impossible, which we really very much needed, because we did not consider no for anything that we needed, because she was the saint of the impossible. She made it happen along with our parishioners and our priest. This is a picture of the main designer of the artworks in Saint Rita, the mosaics, the stained glass windows, the bronze works. This was a very important person, Peter Recker, born in Rhineland, and he was a master mosaic artist, stained glass designer. He was an oil and watercolor artist, also a bronze and goldsmith. And he got his early influence by Dutch artist John Thorn Pryker. And John Thorn Pryker was very influential in Europe, and he was a person who was on the cutting edge of what was desirable new, Art Nouveau, and into the movements after Art Nouveau was in vogue. Peter Recker got his cut his teeth restoring the earliest depiction of Christ in the necropolis underneath the tomb of St. Peter in the Vatican. And there is a connection there, because that early painting, or early mosaic rather, is called the Sol Invictus, the Invincible Sun. And it was a transition point at that time between paganism and Christianity. So the scholars, they all debate on whether or not the mosaic depictions is a pagan depiction or a Christian depiction. But Peter Recker was only in the United States from 1950 and 1962. He worked for Conrad Schmidt in Milwaukee, and we were very fortunate to snare him for Saint Rita. And he has most of his prolific work in his career is at Saint Rita. This is a picture of Sol Invictus, which is in the necropolis at St. Peter's. And I want you to keep that visually in your mind before you see Peter Recker's work at St. Rita. So many people say, well, is his inspiration for the St. Rita mosaic? What's going on here? But look at the chariot wheels and the horses and the stylistic figure of Christ as Sol Invictus. Now, this is Peter Recker's master work, mosaic, the ascension of Elijah into heaven. There's a lot of symbolism going on here, because if you look at those chariot wheels and you look at the positioning of those horses, don't you see a little bit of symbolism there? We don't know that for a fact because we never interviewed him specifically about that, but I kind of see some resemblance there. That was his first work in Rome, and this is his work that he did in 1958, 1959 at St. Rita. And there's symbolism here that I must point out to you, because of this being an African-American church primarily, although we've always welcomed everyone. The gold and ropes that you see ascending down and going back up, Recker intended for that to symbolize swing low, sweet chariot, the Negro spiritual. And he has symbolism in many of the things that he does, but it's subtle symbolism. It doesn't hit you over the head. But I'll point out some of these things as we go through the presentation. A master work. Peter Recker had a photograph laying on the floor in front of that work, and he had 5-gallon buckets of stone in front of him. He literally placed those stones one at a time. There's no stone in there bigger than 1/4 of an inch square. And he was able to show shadows, the nuances of the sculptures, the horses. And it's remarkable that he could have those gold bands coming down the sunlight and show the difference in the horse figure. That's master work at hand. From his eyes, from his hands to the wall, no tracing, one by one, pieces of stone. Unbelievable. And we'll talk about some of the other items as we go. Here's more of an expanded view of the church so that you see how it's juxtaposition in the church. To the left is a Recker mosaic, and to the right, you can see another Recker mosaic. And then you can see the Indiana sandstone in the circular motion. We have a light canopy above, which was always sheds the sunlight even when the church is dark. It provides a focal point for that magnificent sculpture piece of mosaic work. And you'll see as I go further in the presentation some more of the detail that is that deserves to be pointed out about this man's work. And he also did the bronze works, he did the stained glass windows, and he did the mosaic work. All of this, like I said, I think it's the most complete collection of Peter Recker works that I know of. And I've researched all of his works in Europe. I've researched his works here in the United States. There's nothing like this. And if you look down at the bottom of this, you can see Peter Recker has embroidered his signature in the bottom of the mosaic, and you can see how small the stones are. But he completed this main mosaic in '59. The church was built in '58, so he continued to work after the church was dedicated to make sure that these works were executed. And he worked tirelessly, and I have church members who were present when some of this work was taking place. I bring up this particular slide to show you the detailing in the Porto Negro marble columns. Notice how the lines line up, and those are 3 separate pieces of marble. The only way that you can achieve this booked marble is to have those marble pieces cut out of the same stone. So all of these pieces were cut out of the same stone and meticulously placed here so that the striations in the marble line up. That is what I call attention to detail. Fabulous attention to detail. This is the mosaic that's to the left of the main altar. And it's St. Philip baptizing the Ethiopian, another nod to the African-American, because he could have chosen any scene, but he chose the first Christian African to symbolize that Blacks have been part of the Catholic faith or Christianity from the very beginning. We're not newcomers to Christianity. Notable things about this particular mosaic is all of the artistry of the Africans in the back, the horses, the Holy Spirit descending as a dove in the middle, the movement of the water that is in stone, tiny pieces of stone that you can see at the bottom to symbolize the movement of the water. And in a design way, you go down 2 steps to the baptistry, which is Verdi marble again, with gold and bronze. And Peter Recker designed that baptismal font. And at the bottom is a Santa Rosa mosaic that shows fishes swimming in a circle. And it symbolizes Christ chasing the Christians chasing Christ in an integrated circle, never ending, always in movement. And you go down the steps to symbolize going into the water, even though it's dry. It is the only part on the altar where you go down steps, and it's there for a reason, to symbolize your immersion into the water. And all of the movement that Peter Recker did with the movement of the water at the feet of the Ethiopian, very, very remarkable work. Again, he had a picture and his buckets. He didn't trace it. He placed them one by one. He was a tremendous artist. And if you see the communion railing a little bit down in the lower portion of that, and you can see the script in there is a modern script. And a lot of churches, we have what we call the scrolly ecclesiastical type script. Everything here is modern. And so even the script is modern script. And that's the communion railing where the little girls and boys would go down for their first communion. And the inscription says, "Your fathers ate manna and died. He who eats this bread shall never die." And the little triangle that you see off to the right is called an ambry. And that's where the sacred oils are kept for anointing the sick, for baptisms and things of that nature. So just a little curiosity about the Catholic faith. That thing you'll see in several places throughout the church, and that's its purpose. Again, it's bronze, and Peter Recker did all the bronze works in the church. These are the original mid-century modern furniture chairs that we have for our altar services. Again, very cool. People that like mid-century modern, this should be right up your alley because this is traditional mid-century design. Look at that tile work by Dominic Santa Rosa. That marble, Carrara marble, is fabulous. And you need to come and look at it on Saturday in person. And the tiles in the front are gold, not paint. They're gold. So it's a stunning amount of work that Santa Rosa and his crew did there. Dominic was a master. He was from Italy. He was a Catholic. He immigrated. Father wanted to use local people if he could. And so he immediately paired up with Dominic Santa Rosa for the marble works throughout the church. And there's a little bit different view, but you see our Verdi marble altar with our tabernacle. That tabernacle was also designed by Recker. He had it sent to design overseas to Germany to have it executed, a goldsmith there, and then shipped back to St. Rita. And it's 4 angels holding up what the original Ark of the Covenant is what it symbolizes. And that in itself is a fabulous work of art that you would like to see if you're at St. Rita. That tabernacle has been in continuous use since 1958. And so it's a fabulous, fabulous piece. Another small detail, Santa Rosa. These are solid blocks of Carrara marble fashioned into seats. These are the seats for the servers. Used to say altar boys, but now we just say servers because we have young ladies who do it now. I sat on those seats many times. And I don't remember them having cushions when I... But just the care, attention to detail to carve solid blocks of stone for these altar seats. And they're still very much in use today. This is the other Recker work that's to the right of the main sanctuary. And this is the Infant of Prague, which is a 15th century element of the Catholic faith. It has its own history unto itself, which I won't go into. But the Infant of Prague is meant in our faith to be providing you what's needed monetarily. And if you're poor and you need assistance, you would pray to the Infant of Prague. Father Strange was a very much proponent of praying to the Infant of Prague. And so much so that instead of having the nativity figure of Christ as an infant here, he had the Infant of Prague inserted here. And Peter Recker did the rest of the artwork, including a nod again to the African, because of course the three wise men, one was an African. And so in order to keep that theme of embracing the Black Catholic, they chose this particular mosaic. Again, a stunning work. The gold on the crowns, very, very interesting. Notable features here. The Stations of the Cross that you see in most in Catholic churches, which is the Christ's journey toward the crucifixion, and each station of the cross is prayed at certain times of the year. These are very notable in that the wood, which is linden wood, was sourced in Israel with the instruction of get me wood from trees that would have been alive when Christ was on his walk. So they sourced that wood and shipped it over to Tyrol, Italy, where a craftsman made them into our sacrament, to our Stations of the Cross, and they were shipped back to St. Rita. So you can imagine the attention to detail that goes into a complete church like this. On the left, you'll see a series of stained glass windows. Those were all designed by Peter Recker. They were executed by Conrad Schmidt in Milwaukee. And we have other stations, we have other stained glass windows that are not visible that were also very notable with a very important artist. And as you can see on the left, those are altars. The stepping up as you go up the church, those are all altars. And pre-Vatican, they would actually serve masses at those altars on special occasions. When the church was dedicated, all of the altars were in continuous use with simultaneous services going on. So a great design element, but also an architectural functional element because it ties everything together. And that's a little bit better view of some of Peter Recker's designs. He didn't want to do a ecclesiastical design. He wanted the modern lines to be reflected in his work. The other stained glass windows that you didn't see were executed by Franz Mayer of Munich, Germany. And Franz Mayer is one of the preeminent designers of glass in the world. He is ranked right up there with Tiffany and of that ilk. So very important artist. And he has cathedrals throughout the world that have Franz Mayer glass. And we're so fortunate that we have Franz Mayer glass in the entire sacristy of our church. This is another design of Recker. It is the Holy Spirit descending in the form of a dove, which is important in our faith. Makes wonderful play on the light, depending upon the time of day. And the panels in the front are all antique German glass, but wonderful, wonderful sculpture, art piece. The cantilever is on the other side of this piece, which is why we can't think about anything having to do with taking that tower down or rebuilding that tower, because it's supporting the entire skin wall of the church, and that beautiful art piece would be jeopardized. And it makes a beautiful piece for the priest to see when he's saying mass, and when the sun shines in there, you're seeing that beautiful artwork as you're overlooking your congregation. So I'm not a priest, but I'm sure Father enjoys looking at it. On the altar, if you look to the left, you see etched glass. And I'd like for someone in the audience to let me know when we're probably at around 6:40, 6:45. so that we can, what time is it? Okay, good. No worries. But if you look at that stained glass, you can see fishes in our faith, fishers of men. Just the symbolism again, and the bronze works. There's another one, 3 circles. The Trinity in that artwork and the fishes. So symbolism through art. Father wanted to build a retirement center at the end of our church, and this is a depiction of it. He never got to build that. But when he left St. Rita, he worked at St. V's in hospice ministry, and he was essential in helping get the Marquette Senior Living Facility erected. And the pavilion in front of it is named the Father Bernard L. Strange Pavilion. So he continued his mission. He didn't get it done at St. Rita, but he got it done before he passed on. Remarkable. So St. Rita, if you haven't known, we are now a recipient of the National Fund for Sacred Places 2022 cohort, which we're the only Catholic church in the continental United States to be so awarded. And that's going to be a big boost for our capital campaign. And so we're thankful for all the assistance that Landmarks has given us. The staff has been incredible. And I'm going to wrap things up right now so that we have a few minutes for questions and answers. And so it's on you guys. Okay, the question is, what is the capital campaign going to focus on? Our immediate concern right now is the bell tower, because if you see the picture of St. Rita, you can see there's a big piece of it missing. I'll get out of that. But there is a big piece of the brickwork that's missing, and that's unstable. So we're going to focus on the bell tower first. And then we're going to proceed from there for waterproofing the rest of the church to make sure that we don't have any future damage. And then if we get approval from the Archdiocese, we'll move on to other phases, which will be the gymnasium and the parking lot and restoring some of the grounds and things of that nature. So I anticipate that probably be a couple $1 million. Kids, the school is no longer in operation, unfortunately. But I'm not sure how many active parishioners do we have, sister, do you remember? About 140. Oh, 300, but with the pandemic, it goes up and down as to who's in person, who's not in person. Anyone? Yes, ma'am. Perfect question. We have been recognized by the state of Indiana as being eligible for inclusion. We subsequently filed for application for St. Rita to be on the register as a campus. So we're pretty far along with that, and we hope to have that completed sometime next year as soon as the national gets the paperwork process. But we've cleared all of the initial barriers, and we're right in the middle of our application for the campus to be a national register place. Anyone else? We have had a number. I don't remember. I think Cardinal Amissa, which is a cardinal from Africa, has attended St. Rita and said mass there. We have a number of notable parishioners. Of course, I mentioned Colin Chaney, who was a member of our church. But if we go back through the archives, you'll see that almost everyone who was anybody in Black Catholic life has visited St. Rita at some point in time. We were really the center of cultural and social activity for many, many, many years. We have musicians, we have artists, we have educators, we have PhDs who have come out of St. Rita. including me. Yes. Well, since we're right in the middle of Martindale Brightwood, we interact with the neighborhood organizations and they participate, and we have health fairs, we have flu clinics, we have shoe drives. We're constantly volunteering our time and talent to help anybody in our community that needs something. And it's just seamless for the people on the Near East Side because we have been there forever. And we will continue to be there hopefully for another 100 years, which is why this capital campaign is so important, and why I'm convinced that with the participation and help of organizations like Landmarks, we just recently received a grant from the Efroymus Family Fund. Things are happening in a positive light for St. Rita, and people are recognizing the contribution from a social, a cultural, equality, civil rights, athletics. It's all there. And but we're kind of a hidden jewel that nobody knew about. And I consider it my mission to let more people know about this unique and wonderful place where everyone's welcome. And even though we started out as an African-American church, we still predominantly are. If you come to our Mass on Sunday, you'll see persons of majority individuals. You'll see Asian individuals. You'll see Hispanic individuals. And we're all there together to do the Lord's work. And you're all invited. And we're an interdenominational parish. We're Catholic, yes, but we welcome everyone, and we always have.
What time is Mass on Sunday?
11 o'clock on Sunday. Come on down and see us. We'd love to have you. You will be welcomed with open arms. Yes. The question was, do we still have the boxing program and do we interact with Martin University? The boxing club is no longer in existence. The building still stands. It's on the corner of 19th and Arsenal. And that was our original boxing gym. And but Martin University was founded by one of our former priests. And so yes, we do have a connection with Martin University, and not on a first, one-to-one type relationship, but it was founded by one of our former priests who was an associate pastor when Father Strange left the parish. Yes. We do not have a pipe organ. We just have our wonderful carillon in our bell tower, which we hope to get working again. But we do have wonderful musicians. Right now, we're in the transition period with our choir because our prior choir director had to move on. And so we're waiting for the replacement to come, which is an important part of our ministry. We have a very powerful music ministry, and we are anxious to get that started again. And that's going to happen very, very soon, I'm told. So, yes.
Most welcoming parish never experienced more welcoming people, but it's very cool. Question: do you know anything else moving that Knights of Columbus building before then over there? It just seems so odd to me. Do you know anything how that came about or why that?
Well, the question was, how did that building from Fort Bend get moved to St. Rita, and how did that all happen? Well, it was really just out of need, because we needed to get something established right away, because you heard about the conditions of the city at the time, and the oppression that was happening amongst the African-American Catholics, with the Klan being so dominant. So it was so the local community, because Saint Knights of Columbus Catholic organization, they heard about our plight and offered up the chapel. So it's just then the logistics of getting it moved. It was a small wooden frame structure. So we were able to transport it, and once it arrived, then they applied for a building permit at the City of Indianapolis for $18,000, which they expanded it, and then they put the brick facing on it and made it a more permanent structure. But it had 4 classrooms, the church, and 2 small rooms for the priest to reside in. And that's all we had until Father Strange came along and built what we saw during the presentation. But it was, yes, Miss Wisdom. Yes. Unfortunately, that mural can't be saved. It's in the basement, is what you're talking about. And that was the cafeteria when you and I were in school there. We have saved the original etched glass windows from upstairs. And we're also going to be saving the original Infant of Prague shrine that was in the original church. Most of the other elements are either painted into the plaster, and so the building got infiltrated with water, and it had asbestos and mildew, and so unfortunately it can't be saved. It's very much a hazard, and some of the brickwork has started to fail. So unfortunately, it's going to have to be taken down. But we're going to save as many of the architectural elements and cultural elements as possible. And we plan to have a St. Rita Architectural Heritage Center where we'll have all of those artworks placed in there, along with the original church blueprints. A lot of the original artifacts will be stored in there, the original trophies of all the CYO games that we won. If you were from a Catholic church, the last thing you wanted to do was to play St. Rita in anything, because you were going to be taking a beating. And so my dear departed brother was a track runner, and he ran the 60, 100, 220 and relays and races. And since the 60-yard dash is no longer run, it will forever be in his name because he was the record holder when they stopped running the 60-yard dash. So little nod to my older brother. Well, thank you so much for your participation. I think we had one more question. The question is, was there any interaction between the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and St. Rita, since we were both key in the civil rights movement? And the answer to that is yes. Father Strange joined Dr. King on the March on Washington, and he is prominently displayed marching with Dr. King in the March on Washington. Because he was a civil rights advocate, he was appointed over all of the Black Catholics in the Archdiocese at one point, but he was a membership coordinator for the NAACP. He expanded the membership of the NAACP here in Indianapolis by tenfold under his participation. He always championed civil rights, even though, as he said, he only saw 2 Black people before he came to St. Rita. And look shows what you can do when your heart and your mind is in the right place, and that you don't see people as enemies, you see them as friends and neighbors. Questions anymore? I think, yes. Yes, oh yes, he was a devout Catholic. His whole family was Catholic, and he was a prisoner of war in World War II, and when he got out of the prison camp, he dedicated his life for spiritual works because he was a very talented artist. But yes, he was Catholic. Well, thank you so much for your participation. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Cal. That was just really interesting to hear the story. And I hope so many of you will join us on Saturday for the tour or a future event at Indiana Landmarks. Thank you very much.